with us?
Yeah, it's been fun.
You know, I was talking to you a little bit backstage. I've never met you before, but all I did is hear so many great things about you from our young people. You know, we have thousands of young people in God's Anointed Now generation, Victory Outreach, all over the world, and a lot of them said, we want Andy Mineo. So thank you for being with us, but backstage you told me we have a connection, you know, and the connection is Nicky Cruz.
Yeah.
Nicky Cruz, of course, reached my father back in the early 60s, and he's my dad's spiritual father, and David Wilkerson's his spiritual father.
Yeah.
And tell us about that connection, how you got to know Nicky or his organization.
So it's kind of a really cool story when I think about it, when I look over the whole kind of like what the Lord used to bring me to faith and to bring me to the place that I'm at now, where I'm using my gifts, right, to just talk about Jesus and travel the world and tell people about him. It started when I was in middle school. My mom bought me this book called The Cross and the Switchblade. And so I don't know if any of y'all know that. It's a book written by David Wilkerson, and it's about how he went to New York City, and he started reaching the gang members in the streets, and he started a church called Times Square Church, which is a massive church in New York City now. And in that book, I remember I hated reading, right? Anybody know what I'm saying? Like, I hate reading.
Yep.
I hated reading, and I never could finish a book. But this one, my mom got me, and I was just eating it up. I think it was the first book I actually fully read. And it was such a dope story that when I moved to New York City to go to college, Times Square Church was the first church I wanted to stop at, right? And in that book, it was talking about how Nicky Cruz came to faith because David Wilkerson came to New York City, he was preaching the gospel, and he got saved. And then when I got to New York City, going to Times Square Church, I ended up connecting with a guy named David Ham, and there was a ministry that was established called Truce. And Truce was this pretty much performing arts ministry that you would use, you know, arts, hip-hop for evangelism. And I started getting discipled as I started going there. A friend brought me, we started hanging out, started learning about God. I started to meet other people that were my age that were teaching me about him and showing me how to live out the Christian life in the urban context, you know, people my age. So I really started to get discipled there through Nicky Cruz Outreach, and we would go out with Nicky, and we would do these things called hit and runs in the street. We would go out into the hood, and we would just perform and bring huge crowds out from their houses, and then we share the gospel and plug them into churches. So Nicky Cruz Outreach Truce had a huge impact on my life and my music and the direction of, you know, where I'm going now. And
That's excellent, you know.
Nicky's with you.
Yeah, and it's great how Nicky's influenced so many people in his ministry. What's your main focus in what you're doing in rapping and your hip hop music?
Sure.
Tell us what's your main focus.
Yeah, I think my main focus, there's kind of three things. One, I want to connect with people on a horizontal level. I think that Jesus, when I follow his model of ministry, Jesus met people where they were, and he met their needs, right? So Jesus would show up, and he would see that people were hungry, and he would feed them, right? It wasn't a very spiritual thing, right? He wasn't just showing up and guns blazing, but he would meet their physical need. He would connect with them as people, and then he would point them vertically to God. So I love in my music just connecting with people, relating, sharing stories, sharing my life, sharing my struggles. That's a goal in my music, is to connect with people. The second is to influence them, to show them that the hope that I have is in more than this life, right? I want to show them the hope that I found in Jesus. And lastly, I want to be faithful with what God's given me and be creatively excellent. Right? So I know that creative excellence brings more ears and more eyes, right? So I want to be really faithful to steward the gifts that God's given me and the message. So those are kind of...
That's great. That's amazing. I think you've inspired a lot of young people today with your music, and I know a lot of them are looking up to you. And it's a responsibility to be that role model. And do you feel pressure with that? Does it feel a little difficult at times to carry that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I talk about this a little bit in my song called Superhuman, the first song on my album. I just talk about the pressures of people sometimes when they see you on a stage and they see you performing, that they can elevate you to a place that's unhealthy, and they can almost idolize you or almost think that you're more than a human that's been saved by grace, that you're some super Christian that has, you know, super powers, you know, right?
Yeah.
And really the we're just faulty, frail people that God has decided to save in spite of us, not because of us, and give us, give us power to live a life set apart for Him. And if it wasn't for Him doing that, we would be done. So I do feel the pressures, but that's one thing I get to fall back on, is knowing that, man, God, if it's not you that's sustaining me, I'm going to fail. And trusting in you is much more promising than trusting in myself. So I feel the pressures, but
But you push through.
Yeah.
You make it happen.
Yeah, just trying to be faithful.
Let me just ask you a little frivolous questions. What's your favorite thing to do